Joining me now to discuss this is Senator James McGrath. He is a freedom lover. James, welcome. It's great to have you on the program. Now, I don't want to talk about the Ukraine specifically because, you know, I'm at odds with many who have a strong view on it. But I want to talk about the principle of it. Are there circumstances in your mind where it's ever right to ban an opposition party, like we've seen in the Ukraine, but we've also seen attempted in Western countries in relatively recent history?
No, I don't think there are such circumstances that can justify the banning of especially an opposition party. The true test of a democracy, of a liberal democracy, is not how you deal with those people with whom you agree, it's how you deal with those people with whom you violently disagree. And I think one of Menzies' big mistakes was trying to ban, probably his only mistake, was trying to ban the Communist Party in the 1950s. I think it's an essential element of any democracy to have parties who may be distasteful. And the best way to deal with the issues that are raised by those parties is to bring them into the sunlight and allow an open discussion about those issues rather than allowing them to fester in the shadows.
Yeah, I happen to agree with that. And look, you can have any number of fringe parties that will be not elected, but that will be registered and can campaign on a whole bunch of wacky ideas. That's part of democracy. But when you've actually got a member of parliament, or in the case of the Ukraine, you've got another 44 seats there, about 10%, or Mosley or anyone else, to kick them out is to deny the people that voted for them a voice. And that, I think, is a principle that, like it or low, that we've got to actually fight against.
I think if, in the case of the Ukraine and other countries, when you are arguing that you are a liberal democracy or an emerging liberal democracy, in the case of the Ukraine, that you want resources because of that fact, for you to then go against a proud liberal tradition, i.e. freedom of speech, freedom of association, would seem rather strange to me. And I think it's something that could be a blot on President Zelensky, someone who I think is otherwise doing a brilliant job in standing up for his country. But this comes to the test of what is a democracy. A democracy is allowing all views to be heard, allowing all those voters to have the same weight attributed to their vote, and for there to be a government formed by a majority of parliamentarians elected by a majority of voters.
Yeah, and okay, so this is the key principle, and that's why I think the fact that Australia tolerates even the wacky, abusive, I think that are very subversive comments of the Greens, that some of which we heard this week, it's a sign of how strong we are as a society, even though some are making clearly the wrong decision by voting for the Greens, James. That's my perspective. Do you agree that we're a stronger society because we've got these different voices?
Totally. Because what it does is it allows those views, those crazy views of the Greens to be tested and to be drowned by a tsunami of common sense. And I do think there are some voters, especially here in Queensland, in the seats of Ryan and Brisbane and Griffith, who may be having buyer's regret in relation to shifting their votes across to the Greens. But I think politics and democracy would be very boring if you had 76 senators all called James McGrath and all had my views. That would be wrong and dangerous. And the same in the lower house. If you had 151 Peter Duttons, we want to have different views because also it allows ideas to be tested and pushed and examined, and that's very important because by that you get good policy. And also from my perspective as someone on the right of politics, I want the left to critique my policies because I'm stronger for it, because I'm aware of the criticisms that are levelled against my policies by my opponents.
Yeah, very wise words. A good opposition will make you in government a better government. They'll make you a better performer. But one of the complaints that I've had, James, is that The kooky ideas have been advanced by the left for 2 decades now, or more, but 2 decades quite actively, and very few have been able to push back or prepared to push back against it. The cost of doing so is quite high, but that's led to almost this salami slice increment of things that have undermined a lot of the values and traditions and community sense that we've had in this country. And what do we have to do to push back against it and rail against the idiotic utterings that are coming out of the Greens Party?
Well, I would encourage the viewers tonight to get involved with sensible political parties. Obviously, I'd encourage people to join the Liberal National Party, but if people want to join other major parties or further parties further to the right, please do so, because if people don't get involved, it means those with the loudest voices, and that's often the Greens, because they're the ones shrieking on street corners, are the ones that people hear. And I'm going to give you an example. Both in the seats of Ryan and Brisbane, a number of small businesses openly supported the re-election of Trevor Evans and Julian Simmons. That wasn't until the Green supporters of the now sitting MPs got on their websites and left abusive comments, gave poor ratings and all those types of things, and intimidated these small businesses into rescinding their support for Julian and Trevor. And this is the problem we face on the right. On the right, we're too good-mannered. We're too polite. We're too quiet. The business model of the left is to bully, to shout, to shriek, to intimidate. And I'm not saying that we should copy them, but I'm saying that on our side we need a bit of mongrel to stand up for what we believe in. Because, you talked about 20 years. I'd say it's happened since the 70s. There's been this slow march, and you and I have talked about this before, this slow march through the institutions of where people are woodpecking away at the pillars that bring Australia together, and that is very dangerous. So we need a resurgence on the centre-right of politics.
Absolutely right, James McGrath. We saw the woodpeckers at work this week, and thank goodness there were some voices pushing back against it. You're always one of them, and I want to say thank you for joining me on Bernardi tonight. Really appreciate it.